my laptop on, and I feel alright. I got a few joints rolled, and my munchies made. Got my headphones on, and I close the door, don't disturb me. It's time to stand up tall and say some things about the shitty world we're living in with the boys at Raconteurs News. To Raconteurs, Raconteurs, to Raconteurs, Raconteurs, to Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News, Raconteurs News. Oh yeah.
Good evening and welcome to Raconteurs News. On this Tuesday night, it's the 10th of April, 2018. I keep having to get myself to say 2018 and not 2018 because 2018 don't really work. But anyway, I've gone over that a few times. A great show we've got lined up for you tonight. We had a cracking show last night. Thanks to everyone who joined in, who was in the chat room and on Facebook Live. Don't forget, we broadcast every Monday and Tuesday from 7 o'clock. You can catch us on raconteursnews.com, catch us on spreaker.com/users/raconteursnews. And also you can see us on Facebook Live as well. That's on my own personal Facebook page. So you can friend me there at if you go to facebook.com/Holmes2, HOLMES, and the number 2. So we've you can they're all the different ways that you can contact us. You can connect with us. If you've got a story, if you've anything you want us to cover, the best way is probably either a Twitter. I'm at Beckham Cover Up, and Raconteurs is at Raconteurs News. You can contact us on Twitter, on Facebook, email us. The email addresses will be on the website as well. So we've got a great show tonight, and we're almost back to a full lineup. We've just had a bit of a conversation, myself and Andy, with the fourth member of our team, but we've got 3 of us here tonight. So there's myself, and I'm going to introduce my co-hosts. That's Andy Young. How you doing, mate?
Hi, mate. I'm doing pretty well. Just had some very sad news when I logged onto my computer when I got home this afternoon. One of my longest friends has passed away. Very sad. Waiting for an operation on the NHS. I visited him regularly, tried to help him out as much as I could with the pain. Sadly, he didn't call me for a couple of weeks. He said he was going to try some other things, and apparently the police had to break in because he was dead. So, very sad. So, if anybody knows him, Brian, a.k.a. Wiggy, go well, mate. I'm sure you're in a better place now.
Excellent. Well, obviously it's not excellent that your friend's died, but it's a great tribute to him, and it's really sad news. And well, we're all thinking about you, Andy, but you've still managed to drag yourself to the computer throughout your grief and get yourself on to tonight's show. And also we've got Paul Webster making up our trio of hosts tonight. How you doing, Paul?
I'm good, mate. I've got to thank my mate Benty again for doing me evening duty this evening, so I can actually come on and be on the show. So thanks a lot, Benty.
Nice one, Benty. We like anybody who's willing to help out. Anybody really. So listen, we've got a great show tonight, and we've got a guest that we've never spoken to before on Raconteurs News. But since Paul has set this one up, I would like you, probably because you're going to be the one with the most information. So, Paul, why don't you introduce our guest for this evening?
Well, the guest for this evening is a guy whose work I've followed for the last 10 years. When I started to go through all my stuff with in regards to the mortgages and house and things like that, the lads and girls over in Ireland, they were ahead of us because of what had happened to them in 2008 with the mortgage collapse. And it was quite quickly that people realised that these people were going after people's houses with absolutely no authority, no nothing. They absolutely had nothing. It's just what they were used to. And from that, I was speaking to Anthony Carlin, who told me about Ben, and been in touch with him and his groups to get out information for what he was going through. And as many people know, that Anthony created some case law in that I used in my case, and we'll get into that a bit later. But for now, I'd like to introduce Ben Gilroy. Ben, welcome to the show.
How are you? All good?
Brilliant online work.
Brilliant,
So,
Ben.
where would you like to start, Ben? Because I mean, I think there's a lot for us to cover, but I think the start of it is let's start where you've actually begun with all this. How did you get involved?
Yeah, I got involved with a subprime lender here in Ireland. Was basically throwing money at us at the time. And I decided to upgrade a house because governments and everything were telling us to upgrade homes over here. And shortly after we took out the mortgage, within 3 years, the property collapse came. And these property collapses always happen because of this securitization and selling on mortgages and dicing and splicing them. Very similar to the film The Big Short, if anybody wants that. That's exactly what happened here, with the same players as well, it has to be noted. And I did a lot of research in it. Now, having said that, I did approach my subprime lender. We offered to sell our house just to get a smaller house. We tried to do everything we could. And the final straw came when we were asked to fill out SFSs, and we had a meeting with the bank, and they went through my wife's bank accounts, and they wanted to know what a certain payment was every month going into her account, and it was for children's allowance. And when the bank asked us to forward that on to them as well, that's when I almost exploded in the office. I mean, they literally wanted the food out of our children's mouth. So from then on, I studied really hard till 3, 4, 5 in the mornings, and figured out the whole thing about securitization, mortgages, the law, the courts, the whole lot. And when you learn something out of necessity rather than for an earning or a livelihood, I think it's a great driver, you know. And they say the mother of all invention, you know, is necessity.
It certainly is, pal. It certainly is. That's exactly how it happened with me.
Yeah, when we were having some successes here, then I obviously met with Anthony Carlin. He asked me to do a talk up north, and I had already helped a few people up north. And I remember going into the Master's Court. Now, the Master's Court down south is an open public courtroom. You wouldn't know it from any other court within the High Court, really. But when I went to Northern Ireland for my first time, we went into a little private office, and we were just sitting at a table, and there was a man there sipping a cup of tea. He introduced himself as the master of the High Court. And I thought this was a preemptive little chat about how we're going to operate when we actually go into the court. And there was a guy sitting beside me, and apparently he was the solicitor for the bank. So he starts presenting his case to the master. And I sort of went, sorry, is this the court? And he goes, yes. And I said, but the public are excluded from here. and he said, so what? And I said, but this is ridiculous. And I just got up and left. And I was explaining this to Anthony Carlin. I was saying, Anthony, you know, Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights says your trials have to be in the public. And a lot of people think that has only to do with criminal. But of course it doesn't. It has to do with civil. And if you Google, there's some very good documents on Article 6. If you Google things like Article 6 civil limb and then Article 6 criminal limb, you'll see all the rights that you have afforded there. Now, obviously, you have more rights than are afforded anywhere in any constitution or any legislation, because we were all born with certain rights. But I just thought that this was gas. I mean, he didn't even offer me a cup of tea, and he was sipping out of bone china, and this is the way it was going on. And I even said to him, is there even a competent witness here for the bank? And he said, yeah, the solicitor. And I said, but the solicitor doesn't work for the bank. And he said, no, but I'm ruling that he's competent. And I said, yeah, I can rule too. He's competent. He's competent to be a solicitor, but I'm talking about someone to give first-hand knowledge on behalf of a bank. And he said, no, he can do that. And I just said, listen, I'm leaving. Have a nice day. Because, you know, if you consent to these things, you know, they will assume because you didn't, you know, disapprove that your consent was given. So that's the way we left it. I know Auntie has driven that home now in Northern Ireland, and he's having some real successes with that. And I don't think the massive support is still the same. I'm not sure. And I know myself and Guy Taylor, who's probably a friend of your show, and I want to say a big hello to Guy. I know he's not well lately. Yeah. And just, you know, get well, mate. And look, I want to say hello to all. I have a lot of friends through Facebook and who watch me on the internet from, you know, Liverpool all the way down to London and further south. I want to say hello to all of them too, because big shout out to them, you know. Yeah,
man. There's a lot of, like I said, Ben, since I've been following your work for 10 years, I've made a lot of friends over in Ireland. I've been on Sean Maguire's show a couple of times, and so I've been really looking forward to getting a chance to speak to you, because as you were saying, until they're coming knocking on your door and telling you that they're going to do something, and you go, hang on, you can't do this. You know, it's not even in your legislation. You can do this.
Yeah.
And then you think, what's going on here? And that is a massive driver.
Yeah, there is. Now, there's a slight difference in obviously in the UK, and just that, you know, that we said we've never really spoken with each other. I see you're wearing a Liverpool shirt, and had I known that before I started, I would have never agreed to do the interview, being a Man United supporter.
If I'd have known that, I might not even ask you to come on.
I'm only joking now to all the Scouser friends before they're on complaining, and you will know that. Man United softened up the boys for you for tonight.
I think we softened them up for you for the weekend.
Yeah, maybe. But so, and of course, that's no disrespect to my Manchester friends on the other side of the divide. I have to be politically correct with everybody. But
not on this show, Ben. Not on this show.
Yeah. But you see, in our constitution, and because we're a republic. Yeah. Unlike the UK, in a republic, it's well known that all power comes from the people. And I was in a recent court of appeal where a sheriff dragged the family out onto the street in Balbriggan in Dublin, and it was well publicised. Yeah. And you know, I don't want any comments that I might have made there deemed to be anti-British people. You know, it's always against the Crown and the you know, oppressive system from the City of London that a lot of people aren't even aware of in the UK. But you see, what happened there was there was a guy calling himself a sheriff came to the door and dragged a woman and child out as well as a man. Now, there's huge difficulty of doing that in the Republic, because the Republic is obviously set up on a constitution where all rights come from the people. And the sheriff is an overhang of an antiquated legal system that came from Britain, and especially from the Crown. That's where the sheriff really came from, not the Queen. A lot of people sort of get mixed up with that. Yeah. But why he has any power left here in a republic, I don't know, and I don't know where his powers come from. So they did give me some Sheriff's Act of 18-something, and I said, but hold on a second. I said, unless it's after the Constitution of 1939, I don't see how he could have any power. And the judge asked me, did I accept she had power to make an order? And I said, yes, I absolutely accept that, because I can see your office in the Constitution, and I can see your oath of office in the Constitution, so I'm happy with that. But I said, this guy calling himself the sheriff, I said, Judge, you can't kick in a door and drag out a family out onto the road. So where does the sheriff get his authority from? Because he's not in the Constitution. I don't know what oath he takes to the Irish people. And if all power in the Republic comes from the people, I don't have the authority to kick in anybody's family home if they owe me money. So you cannot delegate a power you do not have. Yeah. And that's the difficulty they have in a republic, where unfortunately in your country you recognise only one person to be sovereign. Well, I'm not saying you recognise, but your sort of state does, or the crown does.
Mm-hmm.
So there are huge difficulties, and we would be in a much stronger position, I suppose, which always makes it look like we're well ahead of the likes of Anthony Carlin and stuff like that. But it's just they have greater difficulties.
It's the system, Ben. The system drags us all down over here and in Northern Ireland.
Not only that, the system, as you say, has made us think that you're English, I'm Irish, therefore we must be enemies. And the system always had divide and conquer. Yeah. And, you know, I'm glad a lot of us are starting to get over that, you know, because, you know, as you know, I have great friends in the UK, but just we was always conquer and divide. Look over there, you know, look what he's saying about you. Look at the colour of his skin, you know, look at his curly hair, whatever it is. Yeah. It was always to deflect from us being raped and robbed.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, there's so many people who I speak to now, they don't even realise that the Irish were a massive part of the slave trade as slaves. The potato famine, people know they associate potatoes with the Irish, but they don't know why. And this is the ignorance of what the system's done to people.
Yeah, but what I say about that is I even see the so-called president of our country referring to a famine. Yeah. And, you know, I just want to say for British people who may not know, there was no famine in Ireland. I mean, we don't eat potatoes for breakfast. do you understand? Yeah. And we don't eat potatoes for our supper. We might have a potato with our dinner. But, like, it was okay to say that to Irish people years and years ago that didn't go to school and there was no internet. But imagine there's actually adult Irish people you know, today who have Google at their fingertips. You know, ignorance is a choice now.
Yes, it's certainly.
And when I hear Irish adult people, like my son is only, he's 13, but when he was 11, he told me he was being taught about the famine. And because I have obviously spoken to him about this, he said to the teacher, "Are you telling me the famine was caused because the potato got this disease called blight and therefore everybody starved?" She said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, what about the farmers?" And because we're all farming community back then. And he said, "Surely all the farmers would have had a chicken or two and we could eat eggs. And they must have had a goat or two or a cow or two. And Ireland is covered from head to toe with lakes and rivers that wouldn't be overfished. What about cabbage and turnips and carrots and broccoli and sprouts?" And, you know, I mean, when you actually get into the ideology that we all starved because you couldn't eat a potato. I used to tell this funny story to people, and it was try to imagine back in the time when they said there was a famine. So you have a hard-working farmer, we'll call him Michael, and his wife Mary, and he comes in for breakfast, and he couldn't eat his breakfast because the thought of him not having a spud with the dinner sickened him. So he threw whatever the breakfast was. Now, back then, people would have made their own bread, and they would have had eggs on bread and stuff like that, you know, and God knows whatever else. I'm sure they would have had oats and stuff. But he would have thrown his breakfast in the bin because he couldn't stand the thought of his dinner being served with no spuds or protee, as we would say here in Ireland. And then he comes in for dinner. Now, he's working hard in the field, and he might have had maybe a pork chop, or even if they were poor, maybe a bit of liver and a carrot and a cabbage that they could grow even in their own garden. And Mary might have even caught a trout in the local river because, you know, whatever, or she might have killed the chicken. But because he had no potato, now remember, this man would have been starving to death. He would have thrown all that in the bin because it wasn't accompanied by a potato on the plate. So people have to get around that it's the system, you know, fooling the people at that era with what they fooled them with. And at this era, they'll fool us with securitization and, you know, warfare on financial systems and creating money out of nothing, and it's all this. So it's for the time, and I keep saying, look, let us learn from the past and not be fooled again. Yes, because you know, the idea of famine, when you explain that story, imagine we all heard now that the Italians are dying in their thousands in Italy because the tomato has failed, and therefore they can't make sauce for their pizzas and pastas. So they refuse to eat anything else, and they're all starving. I mean, the mind boggles that adult people believe this all over the world. and that it's still being taught in Irish schools. I mean, the mind boggles at that.
It really does. It really does. When you look at what the education system has done, I mean, I bring it right down to the fact of the language. You know, the English language, I think we've spoken about quite a few times. The English language is perfect for civil law because the English language will have 8 words to describe one thing, whereas other languages will have 1 word to describe 8 things. So you can't bastardize it as much. And the way I explain it to people is, well, you've heard the terminology where somebody says, "Are you the driver of this motor vehicle?" And they say, "Yeah." So, well, because from the age of 4 you've been taught if there's a steering wheel in front of you, you're driving, therefore a driver. So innocently you will say, "Yes, I'm the driver." But a driver being a person and not a man or a woman, and the driver uses a motor vehicle on public roads for monetary gain. Taxi driver, bus driver, coach driver. So you're actually saying, "I'm earning money." They don't even know you're saying that when they're asking you, because if there's one thing that you'll understand, Ben, is the coppers do not understand law. It's not a requirement to be a copper.
No. And you see, under the driver too, you must be one that's employed. Exactly. It will also say that. But you got to remember, there's a legal English, and then there's a normal everyday English, and then there's a business English. You know, so there's 3 really forms of English. So, you know, in London, you know, it took me a long time to find out what your crown jewels were and stuff like this, you know. And it did meant your tools. Did you have your tools with you? Have you got your crown jewels? And so that's a Cockney sort of slang type English. There's a business English that's, you know, quite proper in business, and, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's the legal English that's deceptive, and it's deceptive purposely. And all my kids go to only Irish-speaking schools, which is Gaelic, you know, for Irish. It doesn't mean the English Gaelic, you know, there's a play on words there. But and my eldest son is now fluent in Irish. And I would love to be fluent in Irish, but again, we were taught that so badly that I think they were trying to kill out the language. Because my dream would be to be fluent in Irish and go into the courts where you say they cannot bastardize the words then, because you cannot do that in the old Irish language. No. And unfortunately, the whole English language is full of trickery. And just to give you one example, as you said, driver. Another one would be resident. Yes. You know, if I asked you, are you a resident in the UK, you would say to me normally yes, or at least most people would. But of course, resident in law means something else. It means you're here on business, and when your business is concluded, you will go. And the only time it's used properly in the legal sense, in the normal English sense, is when a doctor is in residency in a hospital. Mm-hmm. And that really means he's there on business, and when his business is up, he'll go. But there's so many legal terms of, you know, understanding, not, you know, doesn't mean what we mean, and all this sort of stuff, that the whole thing is full of trickery. At the minute in Ireland, in our constitution, positive law, which is man-made law, cannot defeat the inviolability of the dwelling in Ireland. That's stated in our constitution. Right. Yet the only time they're taking people homes here is on positive law. Yes. Now, I've noticed in all the court papers, they never use the word dwelling, because if they do, they'll know that they're in breach of the constitution and almost subject to treason. Yes. So they use words like your premises, or
which is commercial,
or your principal primary residence, and all these words, which is commercial. Yeah. And so nobody uses the word dwelling. So to my Irish friends who may be listening to this, if you have a summons or an affidavit and it refers to your premises or your principal private residence, get the court to clarify that it is none of those things, or at least get the bank to clarify it is none of those things. It is a dwelling pursuant to 40.5 of our constitution. Yeah. And then you'll see that the sheriff couldn't possibly act on that because it's inviolable, you know, and it's higher than positive law. So
brilliant. But see, over here we've the term dwelling, obviously we haven't got a constitution as like a republic, but the term dwelling over here is exactly the same. But the trouble is, what they call it in Section 3 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992, which is what pertains to council tax over here. In that section is about dwellings. Now, over here, dwellings is all property, both commercial and non-commercial.
Yeah.
But in that section,
they might refer to what you see as a dwelling house, and that can be a B&B or a hotel. You see,
exactly.
It's still for a dwelling, but it's for commerce. You see.
Exactly. So what they've done is, in that section, it states, and it's virtually quote this, but it states it is not shown in any local or national database that there could be property exempt from non-domestic ratings. Now let's take the term non-domestic out and put in the one word that it actually means, commercial. So there could be property that is exempt from commercial ratings. Well, which property is that? That's what we're looking at. What property is exempt? Because obviously some property is, but they honestly, Ben, over here, they don't know what to do with us. You know, there's so many people attacking all this stuff from different angles. If we can, just go back to the Bill Braggin family, because I know that got a lot of attention over here as much as what it's done over there. Where is it you actually stand at that now? Because I know you was almost like being taken to court because of something you either allegedly said or blah blah blah. But where is it with the family now?
Well, I was brought to court on an injunction to hand up the premises. That's so I mean, imagine me being brought to court to hand up your premises, even if it was a premises. How could I do that? I tell you where it is at the minute. I didn't know much about this family. I was actually sitting at home in my pajamas, and someone said, "Look, there's an incident breaking in Balbriggan, and a family have been dragged out." Now, remember, they were dragged out in one of the coldest spells in Ireland in 10 years. I'm sure you probably got the same over there. And whoever thought, let's say you even had a right to do this to a family in Ireland, you know, because in the Constitution, the family in Ireland is regarded as the most protected unit of all society, higher than man-made law. It actually says that in our Constitution. So imagine if you even had the right to drag a family out. Who thought it was a good idea to do it in the coldest spell within 10 years? I mean, the mind boggles at the stupidity of some of these people. But as I say, I didn't know much about the case. I didn't know much about what court order there was. I didn't know what the sheriff was acting upon. So I did meet with the family. And when I went through all their court papers, I've raised huge difficulties in relation to the bank, the sheriff, and the solicitor's firm. Yeah. So I don't want to say too much about that now, no, and that's why I didn't put up any further videos, because I'm hoping that the bank in that case will see common sense now, and we can quell a lot of reaction that KBC have been getting, and rightly so. And they may be in for more difficulties in the coming days and weeks and stuff like that, because, you know, you can imagine, like, you know, during the so-called famine, was the Crown oppressing the Irish people to give food, and there was shiploads of food being left to feed soldiers fighting Crown wars all over Europe, and that's where the food was going. Yeah. And we came from a very hard position, you know, when our constitution was done and we fought for independence and stuff like that, because we came from an oppressive system, of which you still live under, by the way, where the Queen or the King at the time and his troops and whatever were downgrading the people, and the landlords of, you know, the Freemasons who supported this system were burning people out of their properties in Ireland and putting them off their farms, similar to what's going on today. It's just done under a different name, but it's still the Rothschilds and everybody else behind it. And so with our constitution, you can imagine the authors of our constitution were going to protect the dwelling, the family, and make sure that they were protected higher than any man-made law in case our governments got infiltrated by those people. Yeah. And they have been infiltrated by those people who bring out these statutes now thinking you can take all this stuff from us again. Sorry, you can't. And so we're sitting quite happy on that. It's just a lot of people in Ireland don't know either.
That's what the issue I find over here. When I speak to people, Ben, particularly about describing the debt-based economy. When you tell them that it's a debt-based economy, they get it, they understand it, but they don't know, maybe it's they don't know what to do, but they don't want to do anything because of the fear. And I do understand the fear. Like what you were saying was you was trying to learn this as you went, and that's a massive drive. But you get to the point then, whereas I was in a county court, I asked the judge one question, and I asked the court clerk before he went in. I'm sat in the foyer, and I said, could you ask the judge what jurisdiction he's standing under today to claim authority over me and my private property without my consent? I was representing myself. I had no solicitor, so there was no, when he looked out, there wasn't two solicitors, there's no trust, there was no authority given to him. And I said, can you ask him, please? 4 minutes later then, armed response police arrived, ran into the foyer. They ran in and out of every courtroom looking for a breach of the peace that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And I looked at them, watched them like this, like Keystone Cops, and I looked back at my mate and I went, no, for me. And at that point, they came over to the court clerk and I was summoned into the court. I stood before a judge saying, look, I don't care what she's doing with her property. I'm not selling my property. She can sell hers, it's her property. I'm not selling mine. With 2 armed police stood in front of me, 2 behind me, and 1 either side of me, and a police sergeant going like this with his hands in his flat jacket, talking to me, mate, saying, have you any idea why we're here?
Well,
I mean? So,
for intimidation.
Exactly. And then over the next 5 hearings, there was over 30 coppers, video evidence gatherers. I'm driving down to the county court with 3 police passenger vehicles, police outside, inside. I'm thinking, I know armed robbers who've been to courts without all this. I'm going, what the fuck's going on?
There was probably a young lady being raped up the road, or a supermarket being held up while the cops were down there intimidating you.
Exactly.
And it's the same here in Ireland. Now, in fairness to our guards over here, they're not as bad, and they don't carry guns mostly. So it's not too bad. But having said that, anytime I'm in the High Court, there's always a number of Gardaí come in and they just follow me around, you know. But it's part of the intimidation process. Yeah. I mean, look, you know, I've been done for contempt on several occasions, so I don't want to say too much. But look, anybody read between the lines, I'm target number 1 because part of it is knowledge, but also part of it then is the gonads to stand up to these people. And if you have that, when you have that, they have to attack you some other way, and they'll continue to do that to me. But I have to protect my family, and then others beyond my family that I see fit. At least I'll go to my deathbed knowing that I fought a good fight rather than just gave in, you know, because our forefathers who fought this oppressive system that's still applying today in your country and ours, they fought and died for that, and they would be turning in their graves to see us like bailing out banks. I know you're bailed out banks too, but like just in Ireland, we didn't need to bail out anybody. You know, banks made investments on the stock exchange. It all fell apart. It wasn't because Irish people were not paying their mortgages. People think that's what created the collapse. It didn't. What created is their dodgy investments went pear-shaped, and then no one would buy their worthless bonds, and that happened in every country. Yet our government, with no authority from the people, being a republic, decided to bail them out and put debts onto our unborn children even, and to my grandchildren that are not even born. And we have the farcical situation where today our main hospital in Dublin has asked people not to show up to A&E. There's too many people waiting on trolleys, and we've given all our money away.
It's mad. It's madness. Go, Andy. Andy, were you going to say something, pal?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say how you brought that, you questioned the jurisdiction, how that really ties into next Monday's guest. I'm delighted to say that we're going to have someone who's done his own stint as a radio show, as a radio host, but he's going to come on and have a talk to us, even though he's packed it in now. And that's Paul Cotty. I see Paul's just arrived in the chat room, so I believe you're well familiar. But that really parallels what happened to Paul. You know, he asked the question, is it civil or criminal? And next thing you know, he's in a cell and comes back into the court badly beaten. So
Yeah, well, you see, that's the issue. Once you stand up to it and you ask the right question, well, they can't defeat you then. So the best way to defeat you then is a smack of a baton and threaten you with jail. And I challenged jurisdiction of a high court, and I was told that the judge was satisfied he had jurisdiction. And
unbelievable. There's a lot of presumptions going on. I mean, we know that all of this law is all based on presumption, but it is absolutely impossible. Whether they look at legal standing, but whether you've got legal standing or not, it's impossible to absolutely stand there and rebut everything. This is where when I was going through all of that, Ben, I knew there is something simple that we're missing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We had everything was right.
Course, yeah.
Everything was right. But if there's one thing I've learned in 10 years, Ben, is if it isn't simple, it's not correct. We're playing their game if we keep it complicated. Let's get simple. Yeah. Have I engaged in any commerce? Has the bank lent me any money? Well, the answer is yes, I'm engaging in commerce, but I'm coming with clean hands here. Are you lending me the money?
Yeah.
Well, no, we know they cannot lend money. It's illegal for a bankrupt bank to lend money. So we know that they're facilitating credit. Yeah. And then when you're talking about securitization, I mean, if you break it down to a story and you're going in for a bank for £100,000, once you've signed terms and conditions, nobody reads the terms and conditions. I was guilty of that as well.
Yeah.
The power of attorney, what you're gifting them, and that's meant to be a one-off, but they don't treat it as that. They just treat it as you've given them carte blanche to execute documents in your name. Well, I've signed an agreement that the debtor will pay.
But because you can still ask for a copy of the any documents they executed under that power of attorney. It'd be interesting to see it. In Ireland, it's slightly different because we have a Powers of Attorney Act in 1996, and it has to be on a separate form. It has to be on a separate form. It can't be in the mortgage, and it has to be on a template similar to what they suggest in the Act. So that's why they have a much more difficult time here. Now, I don't know if you have a Power of Attorney Act in the UK. You may have, because a lot of our acts come from the UK. Even some of our modern acts have come from the UK, and they're almost word for word the same. So you can see the same authors are exactly the same. So how could that be? And also in a lot of our acts, even though they're modern, they still have, if there's a fine or anything for it, they still have the pound symbol. That these guys were so lazy when they copied and pasted your acts and statutes that they didn't even change the pound to a euro.
That's about right, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. About right. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask you about first of all, I wanted to ask Paul if he'd switch a light on, because on the Facebook Live you're just a little bit dark. Everyone can see all of us apart from you. So,
I've got two lights on.
A bit dark. But Ben, what I wanted to ask you is what is the general mood like in Ireland? Are people waking up to this?
Yeah. And
is there a momentum? Because I know that we had a bit of momentum here, but it seems to have dissipated a little bit, and I don't know what the situation is in Ireland.
Yeah, no, there's quite a strong amount of groups around the country who go to the courts and challenge them, and they're not afraid to shut a court down, and they all share information. Of course, you see, we're a very small community. We're only about the size, population-wise, of Birmingham. We're just spread over a much larger area. And I wouldn't like to have been living in a time where we didn't have Facebook or Google, because only for that we all get to know each other on Skype and we share ideas. So in a small country, well, not a particularly small country like Ireland, but the small population of Ireland, like my videos reach thousands every time, and I would have done a lot of talks around the country, and I told people to set up groups and share information, and because of that, I suppose Ireland seems to be so far advanced, and where you seem to have not coordinated properly, because it's such a vast country you have with such diverse ethnic communities and everything. And while that diversity of ethnic community is starting to creep in here, it's still not the same, so you don't have sort of the watered down national pride that you may have in the UK. I mean, I've seen some, and I'm not racist by any means. I want to make that very clear. But when I go to Spain, I like Spain to be Spanish. I don't like it to be New York with all the same shops. And when I go to, Turkey, I like to meet Turks and their ways of life, and it's interesting to me and all. And I'm not trying to change them to be Irish either. So I think a lot of us. I think it's a greater plan to, dilute national identity, because then the chance of you standing up as a nation, well, what's your nation? I mean, most of London, I don't know if the population is high in terms of English people. And I'm not racist in saying that. I've visited London a couple of times, and it's not a racist statement. Everybody plays the racist card. I have plenty of friends from all different nationalities all over the world. I mean, I helped a Nigerian church here in Dublin, so I'm not racist in any shape or form, but I'm just saying that, it's part of the plan of fighting back against the system, that if you dilute the national identity of a group standing together, and then you're told, well, he's black, you must be against him, or he's robbing your job, or whatever it may be, then it's always an idea to turn against, like what I said at the start of the programme, where Irish were turned against English and Northern Ireland people because you wore a certain colour on a shirt. I mean, again, it's going back to that stupidity of the potato. I mean, we were potato eaters and they were beer drinkers or whatever, I don't know. But do you understand the divide between us is nothing. You see the New York gangs even, where you wear a blue hanky and not a red hanky. And it's just this, so long as you can have another enemy rather than the real enemy, then they're happy. And now you see in Ireland, they're after bringing in this abortion debate. And everybody's having a go at each other now, okay? Now, if you consider that Ireland's national debt has gone now, that we're absolutely a bankrupt country. We have people lying on hospital trolleys. There's no carers for the elderly. 1 in 4 children go to bed hungry at night. There's something like 50,000 families facing eviction. And in a small country like Ireland, and you allow, say, even 4 people per household, that's 200,000 people going to be evicted in a country of 4 million. I mean, who's going to pay for them? And that's who's going to be evicted. Nearly every hotel and B&B in Ireland is rented by the government, putting families up at huge cost. And what do we want to debate in Ireland? What's the big fight about whether you have the right to abort the unborn child? I mean, when will people wake up to what's going on?
I think it's what you were saying at the start of the programme, that until it's in their face, until they're knocking on their door, people won't interest. I mean, what you were saying about it being diluted, I'm like yourself, Ben. If we have a saying on this show that if you're a cunt, you're a cunt. It doesn't matter what colour, what creed, what religion you are.
That's right. Exactly.
And this is my point. I live in a very small town in northern England, right? When I was a kid, if a black man had walked through Lee Town Centre as a kid, it would be the talk of the town because somebody had seen a black man.
There
was nothing racist about it, but you just didn't see black people. Now there's black people everywhere. And that's again, it's not about being racist. The street I live on, my town of Lee is this town's got its own language again that's dying out. It's called Leith. Old English it is, but it's spoken a proper broad Lancashire dialect. That's died off. I can sit with my curtains open and the window open, close my eyes, and I could think I'm in a foreign country just by the people walking past. My street is now known as Little Romania. Now, if you look at the Kalergi plan, which is what you were talking about, of all these migrants being... And we know that the plan is, if there's especially in America, they were targeting large proportions of population that were white, and they're saying there's far too many white people there. We need to put some blacks and some ethnics in, and that does make people move, whether it's down to racism or not.
But not only that, if you consider our country, we have a gay Taoiseach. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he's a prime minister. That nobody voted for him to be the prime minister, as we call Taoiseach in this country. Mm-hmm. And he has suggested that we should take another 1 million immigrants, right? That's roughly 25% of our population, in circumstances where our health system is broke, our social services are broke, we can't afford medicines or to feed our own children. We want to evict everybody. There's a housing crisis, and he wants to bring in a million immigrants. Now, look, I'm not against immigrants at all. I mean, Irish were probably the greatest immigrants all over the world, but we went to countries that could afford us, and we were workers and were willing to work for a living. And I'm not saying, look, Polish and Latvians and all those have good work ethic when they come here too. So I'm not saying that, but how can a country who is bankrupt, can't feed or home their own, and say we'll bring in another 25% of the population? So this guy has got to. And, when you see him then getting rid of a Russian diplomat because of a so-called chemical attack or from
lie, you mean? So tell me it's a lie.
But even in no evidence whatsoever, because Putin obviously is rattling a few cages. This guy, I mean, we're neutral. Even in our constitution, we remain neutral simply because we should. We've never invaded any country. We've no army worth talking about, and we should remain neutral, because if any army of any decent size came in here, we'd be dead, especially in modern warfare. We remind ourselves of a bit like Dad's army. That's no disrespect to my old Irish soldier friends or anything like that, but that's just the truth. We're a very small island with 4 million people, and if Birmingham could outpopulate us in one town, imagine what modern warfare of big countries like Britain, Russia, France, Italy, and America, any of these countries, even Iran, Iraq, any of them would destroy us by a push of a couple of buttons. And this guy wants to start dragging us into a war against Russia by expelling a diplomat. Where did he get the authority to do that? Certainly the people didn't give it to him.
The people have just been fucked over and ignored, haven't they? Go on, Jason, you was going to say something, pal.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on a point you were making earlier on, and when you were, and I know for a fact you're not racist.
Yeah.
But what we seem to do is when we're talking about race, we seem to try and qualify that and and say, look, I'm not racist.
Yes.
I think we should stop apologising for somebody else's perception that they might have of you simply because you've got a view that's different to theirs. So we need to stop apologising when we say, look, this is what they're doing. All these divisions are put into place on purpose, and all these divisions are put into place, and then you get the bloke who says, look, there's a poet who can't get a job, and what he perceives is that there's lots of immigrants coming in from Eastern Europe and they're taking all the jobs. And so what that then does is that then he sort of leans towards and looks towards people like Tommy Robinson. Now, not knowing that Tommy Robinson is being supported and promoted by the very people that have made all this happen, and that's the reason why. So we need to stop apologising for genuine, if it's
concerns, irrespective of
genuine opinions, and we need to just say what's on our minds and not apologise for it. If someone don't like it, it says more about them than it does about you.
That's it. It's just that the claim has been made against me on several occasions that I'm racist, so I always feel I have to nearly defend that, and of course I'm not. You'll see my nephew was on a program called First Dates that you have in the UK, and he while the date didn't work out, he did meet a black girl because I believe that was his preference. So but you must remember, in Ireland when we grew up, when I was young, I too, like you, didn't see many black people. And where I live, we still don't see many black people, or even foreign people, white people, foreign for that matter. And I remember when I went to Orlando in the 80s, my perception of black people were they were good singers and athletes, because the only time I ever saw them was on Top of the Pops or at the Olympics. And so it was a funny perception to have as a kid. So you can imagine when I seen some lovely back people, but they were absolutely huge people, I couldn't take my eyes off them. But you know, this racist divide, my answer to this is, look, there is only one race on the planet, and that's the human race. Everything else is not a race, by the way. You know, there's no such thing as the race of Turkey or a race of Turks. You know, there's one race, but there's always this conquer and divide. And you mentioned my friend Anthony Carlin. Anthony Carlin and myself, if we fed into the bullshit of divide and conquer, we should be enemies, because, you know, I was raised as a Catholic, obviously, down south. Anthony Carlin, I mean, it's well publicized what he works at. And therefore, you know, we should be enemies. But because both of us don't fucking follow that nonsense anymore, or that bullshit, and the veils have been lifted off our eyes, we are truly friends. And the veil needs to be lifted, irrespective, as you say, if someone on this is a CUNT, then that's what they are. And it doesn't matter what colour their skin is, what they work at, or whatever. And that's what I was trying to make the point at Balbriggan. Didn't really matter what you worked at or what you previously worked at. You know, if you're one of them, you're one of them, and that's it.
I must admit, when I was, I watched the video and I was commenting, I think it was on one of Vin's live feeds, and I was commenting because of everything. I was saying, please don't let this start to be about Anglo-Irish, because it's the same fuckers that are doing everybody. And it could have been so easily taken that way, because obviously the bailiff was ex-British Army, and the guy who didn't the guy actually get knocked unconscious who was pulled out of the house?
He did, yeah, he did. So, but not only that, when he was at the table, they put in their affidavits he was reading a book. He was actually just reading the Bible, sitting at his table, ignoring everybody. And one of the there was ex-paramilitaries there as well from Northern Ireland, and one of them were wearing these SAP gloves, SAP gloves. They're like
you've got the tungsten in the knuckles, aren't they?
It's like a knuckle duster, lead over it, if you like. And he just
tactical weapons.
And he just punched him straight in the face. Now, we have legislation of Offensive Weapons Act in Ireland, and SAP gloves are one of the gloves that are not allowed. And, you know, there's so many issues to this that raises its ugly head. Now, the point when I was brought to court about the injunction, the judge made the point about what if they're ex-British soldiers, and so what if they're ex-British paramilitaries up north? And I said, she said to me, surely it doesn't matter what somebody's previous job was. And I said, no, I accept that absolutely. Ex-British soldiers and ex-PSNI people are my friends. But I said, if I was a staunch Republican, of which I'm not, but if I was, and how, first of all, would I get, if the shoe was on the other foot, how would I get a security job in Northern Ireland? Why would I not work for a security firm down south? And secondly, am I being singled out to work in a particular area because maybe Irish people, they can't get enough of them to do the job? And then also, let's say I worked for a security firm in Northern Ireland, and I go to a staunchly Protestant orange area where the blinkers are still down on both sides of the equation, because they don't realize we're not actually enemies. But let's say, this is what I said to the judge, let's say I was working in that security firm, but I'm a staunch Republican living down south, and I've asked to take a Protestant family out onto the street in a staunchly Protestant area. I said, what backlash do I expect to get if somebody identifies me as being that person, Republican down south, staunch Republican? I said, I would expect, a hiding at the very least, or my life in danger or something. And I said to the judge, equity cannot fix stupidity. So, and that's just a fact. Equity does not fix stupidity. And so if I've taken on that job, I can't go to the court crying afterwards, oh, look what they did when they found out what I was doing was wrong.
But that's exactly it. These people actually do not realise, a lot of them, what they're doing wrong. They are told that they have this authority. And what we're seeing over here, Ben, is I knew a lot of good, honest men and women who were police constables. Those people aren't in the job anymore. Some of them said, I didn't join the job to do 95% paperwork, which is revenue collection. This is all what they're being used for. And the basics of it is, if you don't give your information and you haven't not committed a crime, which you're not obliged to give this information, but why are people talking to these idiots? People are giving them the information to plastic coppers. You know, these aren't even police. No. They're environmental officers. What's your name?
That's right. And unlike Ireland, your force is called police, which comes from obviously the word policy, and policy enforcement is what they do. Yes. Our constitution, of course, doesn't allow for police either. It allows for the Irish term Garda Síochána, and what that means in English is guardians of the peace.
Yes.
So that's all they should be doing. They have no authority for revenue collecting. That should be Department of Revenue if they have any authority. But so you can see where our forefathers came from your system and tried to correct everything in the Constitution. But then, of course, when we go into court, they'll fly a maritime flag and they'll say the Constitution is not here, because I noticed the last time I was in court for the injunction and I was raising the issues of constitutionality and the sheriff and everything else, there's the Jolly Roger, as I call it, sitting in the corner.
The pirate flag.
Yeah, but I just want to make the point that, look, there's something wrong with people who take a job dragging families out of their homes for corrupt banks. Yes. You can't really live anywhere in Europe or America without knowing that all banks are corrupt. You just can't. That's just an ignorant choice that you've chosen to remain ignorant on it. Yeah. But even whether you know that or not, I would prefer to have a job picking up dog shit in parks than drag people from the home if I couldn't feed my family. It's a job I just couldn't do. And even being a receiver, it's a job I couldn't do. To go out and throw people out of their business that they've built up for a number of years through some alleged receivership, when, it's a job I just couldn't do. I can sleep in bed at night with what I do. I used to be an electrician and stuff like that. I used to be a bodyguard. But it's one job I couldn't do, is to go out and basically take people out of their home and families. How could you as a human being do that? I remember when some doctors and psychiatrists, they did this thing into the Nazis, and they said that the only difference between a psychopath and an ordinary person is the lack of compassion.
Yeah.
And how could you drag a family out of their home, irrespective of, let's say you knew they couldn't pay and whatever, and the bank did hold the mortgage and everything was right. How could you still work at that job? So you must be a
special kind of person.
It takes a psychopath.
Yeah.
It takes a. I'm glad you're right.
Listen, we're right at the hour mark.
See, you're a northern lad. You say what you like, and you like what you say.
Oh, well, I bloody well say. Yes, exactly. Well, yeah, it's the only way to be in it, really. I mean, everyone dresses things up round everything and tries to make things, sound.
Well, I have to be the respectful face of all that over here. You see, that's why I normally wear a suit and stuff like that.
But I'm obviously not respectable because I've got a Sheffield Wednesday.
Of course, in my mind, I'm saying exactly what you're saying. When in court, I have to be saying different things. What comes out of my mouth is not normally what's going on in my head.
Anyway, we are at the hour mark, and we take a break at the hour mark. We're going to have a bit of a comfort break, play a couple of tunes. Big thank you to everybody who's watching on Facebook Live, all the people there commenting, loads of comments in there. If you go to facebook.com/Holmes too, you'll be able to find the feed on there. I've shared it in a couple of places as well, so get yourself on the feed. And a big thank you to everyone in the chat room as well. Bit of a lively chat. I hate the Germans. Now we don't.
But again, the Germans were fooled, didn't they? I mean, let's remember, Hitler wasn't even German.
we don't know whether that's Dinny or whether it's Heath, because Heath left the chat room just before that, and then suddenly this guy turns up. So we'll try and solve that mystery during the break time. So we're going to have a couple of records. If you're listening on Spreaker, you'll hear those records. If you're listening on Facebook Live, all you'll hear is what we talk about during the break time. So anybody, just remember, Ben, while we're on as break, you won't be broadcasting live on Spreaker, but it will be on Facebook Live. So don't say anything that you wouldn't want everybody to know.
So don't let this come out. This is what you're saying.
Don't say fuck or cunt.
an email. You wanted to read out an email that you've received from somebody.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, mate. We got an email from a guy called Edward. I won't give his second name in case he's a bit shy, but he says, "Hello, Andy. Hello, Jason, Andy, Aid, Webby. Hi, guys. I'm Edward. I live in Northern Ireland and absolutely love Raconteurs News. Bloody fantastic. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The show you did with Alan Wilson was amazing. You need more Alan Wilsons on the show." Well, I don't know if we've got any more Alan Wilsons. We might try and get that old Welsh guy about the history. He's very good. But we certainly get the same Alan Wilson back on again. He says, what about getting Rob Freeman back on again? Well, unfortunately, Rob seems to have stepped back from things, and I don't know whether he's taking a break or he's given it up. But Rob's really gone off the radar just lately, but we'd be more than happy to get Rob back on whenever he's available. He's great as well as that he can actually tell the listeners how to do what they're doing. So we all need to bring down this dictatorship and set us free, guys. I was wondering if you know how to deal with the DWP or anyone that could advise me on how to challenge the DWP. He goes into details of his disability, spine and degenerative disc disease, also fibromyalgia, terrible pain. And he's saying that they're trying to get him off disability living allowance and onto what's it called now, PIP. So he's most upset that they're trying to take away his entitlements. He says, I call it soft genocide or death by government.
Democide it's called.
Sorry?
Democide it's called.
Democide, yeah, death by government. So if we've got anyone who's able to help this guy, please get in touch with us, info@Raconteurs News, and we'd be happy to pass your details on. So I know we have got some great people out there doing great work who are happy to help people. So thanks for the email, Edward, and I hope we'll be able to get you some help on that.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you for that email, Edward. It sounds well. It's very flattering, and it's always good when people, tell you that they really love the show, and it shows that we're get into the absolute real people, not just the fly-by-night ones.
The only thing is, he may say tonight's show is shit now because I'm on
it. we tend to have very, very loyal listeners. So it's always good to hear that we've got another one. So brilliant, and I hope you're able to get that sorted out, Edward, and I hope you're feeling better, and I hope you've got your bed on an incline as well, because I think that would be the one bit of advice that myself and Andy would give you. Anyway, we had a bit of a chat. We were talking about sport, weren't we, in the break time? I don't know if you want to expand on that, because we were talking about sport, and we've spoke about it before. And I have this theory that sport, that particularly football, is like a reflection of society. You've got the masses, the majority of people who are the ones that are paying, so that you get these players playing on these huge, obscene wages. Wayne Rooney were on £300,000 a week at Manchester United, and when that happened, I got a mate who'd been a Manchester United season ticket holder for such a long time, and as you can imagine, it's difficult to get a season ticket. There's a waiting list at Manchester United, and he gave it up and went to support FC United of Manchester. Because he was so disillusioned with it that he's spending his season tickets going up and up and up and up and up, and the wages of the players are becoming more and more distant from the fans.
Like gods, nearly.
You could have a drink together and stuff, wouldn't they? So we were talking about that, weren't we?
They're acting like gods as well.
Yeah, but you see, like the likes of that too. How many families are, in the audience paying those tickets and still struggling to make ends meet at home because they feel that, it's their relief to watch these gods and imagining having that much money and looking at the flash cars and all that sort of stuff. It's crazy, but I used to be very passionate about sport and stuff like that. Now I just use it as a release, just to throw my mind off things. I'll watch a game, and tonight's game I did want to watch, but I wouldn't be crying or whinging no matter what team I supported. I just take it now with a pinch of salt, and it's just a bit of entertainment for me. But you see some people there, it's life and death to them almost, because it's part of that divide and conquer again. It's you're orange up north, we're green down south, you're red in Manchester, you're blue in Manchester. It doesn't matter what it is, so long as we can divide and conquer you. Yeah. You were saying it was your birthday there. First of all, I'll say happy birthday to you.
No, in April 28th. Sorry, 18 days to my birthday.
Oh, in 18 days. Sorry about that. My question to you about that is, how do you know?
Well, I don't. My parents told me, yeah. It's hearsay. Yeah.
The reason I say that to you is one of the Gardaí stopped me one time here in Ireland, and I gave all my details, but this particular female cop, if you like, just had an attitude. And when she asked me for my date of birth, I said, how could I possibly know that? And she said, if I don't give it to her, she was going to arrest me. And I said, but sure, isn't it an offence to give misleading information to the Gardaí? And she said, yes. And I said, well, sure, I couldn't possibly know when I was born. Do you think when I came out of my mother's womb, I looked up at the diary and said, or the calendar, and said, oh, I must make a note of that? And I said, so I couldn't possibly. I said, you don't even know your date of birth. And she says, no, I do. I said, you don't. You know what you were told it was, but you've no evidence to say that that was correct. So she arrested me. And I said to her, is it civil or criminal? She said it was criminal. Now, if you think about criminal, I mean, there's so many aspects to criminal. So I said to her, who's the injured party? And she had to think about it for a minute. And she said, the state. But I said, don't the state keep the records of the births and deaths? And I said, are you telling me that they are injured because I don't tell them what they told me was the truth? I said, that doesn't even make sense. And I've always said that, the state and these forces only have authority over criminals. And so when you don't have enough criminals or you can't control enough of the people, what you have to do is criminalize just normal, mundane things. So because I don't know when I was born, and I genuinely don't or can't remember, apparently that's a criminal offence. And if I was dropping my kids to school in a car that didn't have some bit of paper in the window, that's a criminal offence. Or if I happen to be phoning someone, that's a criminal offence. I mean, if I'm fishing and I'm hungry, that can be a criminal offence. I mean, if you actually think about this, everything can be criminal. I mean, from the time I leave my home, let's say I'm driving into Dublin to do something, the amount of criminal offences I could commit, according to the state, could be in the region of 30 maybe, where I wouldn't have harmed or caused loss or even insulted anybody. So I would get in my car, let's say it didn't have tax or insurance or whatever, and I drove past a toll and didn't pay it, and I went 33 miles an hour in a 30-mile zone, and I've never caused any harm. Nobody's even noticed me, and yet I'm a criminal 10 times over for this. And that's what, Hitler used to say, that the way you take people's rights away is little by little, under the secrecy of darkness, if you like. And that eventually you'll wake up. And, in Ireland now, of course, we have these water charges. So it's a criminal offence that if you don't even pay for water. We had a politician one time who said, actually on a political programme, well, he said, water doesn't just fall from the sky.
Do you know what, Ben? Ben, if that had been a joke about an Irishman
I know. You don't think it was racist, but he just played into everybody's hand. But you look at the Irish are the best at laughing at themselves anyway. And why wouldn't we? When you have a politician on a live TV show saying that we have to pay for water because it doesn't just fall from the sky, you know.
It's the same as money not being made on... money doesn't grow on trees. Well,
yeah.
If it's paper, it does.
Yeah, that's right. But sure, I was ridiculed on a very well-watched national TV program called Prime Time, because what they did was they invited me on Prime Time one time, and I held my ground so well that the producer said, look, we hit you so much about this and that, you'll be invited on. Now, we had to do that just so the public get to know you. I was never invited back on the program ever again. But what they did was a hit piece on the program. And when they were talking about me, they sort of darkened the screen and had a picture of me. And they played this sort of haunting music in the background. And they said, these people believe money is created out of nothing. You know, I just thought to myself, this is hilarious, you know. What else is money created out of? Only thin air. I mean, what's quantitative easing? Does anybody actually know what that means? That means putting a fiver on a photocopier and just keep...
Yeah, exactly. It's legalised counterfeiting. If me and you did it, Ben, we'd be in jail. But they've legalised it to counterfeit it themselves.
But not only that, even if we accept that, I mean, there's been professors of economy from Southampton University and everything has given these talks now, and they confirm that I'm correct, that money is just created out of nothing. It's brought into existence when you sign an application for a loan. But what they don't tell you is interest is never created. So people don't realize that this is a three-card trick before you even start. And just to give it for your listeners a simple example, let's say there's only 10 people on the earth and I'm the bank. And all I have in existence is €1,000. And 10 people come to me for a loan of €100. And I give them all €100. And they all agree to pay me back. Once I introduced interest, right, there has to be defaulters in the system. Either they all have to default, or when they exchange money with each other or business ideas or trade with each other, some will lose out more than others. Some may be able to afford the interest, but others cannot. And that's the sum. And it doesn't matter that it's 10 people or 10 billion people. The sum is still the same. Once you introduce interest and don't create the interest, you will always have defaulters, irrespective. No matter how hard they try, no matter how hard they work, no matter how many jobs they have, they will default, because that's the way the system is set up. It's a three-card trick, it's an illusion, and therefore the system is set up to have defaulters. So I always say, why is the Bank in Ireland complaining that there's 40,000 defaulters on the mortgages? They've done the system that way. They know that's how the system works. What are they complaining about? If I paint my wall red, and I know my wife hates red, what do I expect? Only a slap in the face when I do it. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you know by your actions, it is only going to create this result. When the result happens, what are you complaining about?
Exactly.
That's my problem.
But this is what the problem is. You were saying earlier, Ben, that people don't realise they put so much faith in their ignorance. I believe it's a faith in ignorance, because everybody can always justify it through cognitive dissonance or whatever. That's what life is like. I mean, I remember my mum telling me when I was 6 years old, I said, Mum, you and my dad work really hard. Why? Well, I don't want to get a job. I'd rather play on my bike. You know, it's a childlike mind. I'd rather play on my bike. And she said, oh, well, you'll need to get a house. You'll want to get married. You'll want to have children. You'll want to go on holiday. You'll have to pay all your bills. And I said, why? And she says, because that's life. And I'm sat here now saying, I cannot pay my bills because it's a debt-based economy. If I put debt with debt, I have more debt. So I'm just increasing the national debt by attempting to pay these bills and not setting the debt off.
And none of that, you're still supporting that system of trickery. You know, and there's a lot of people beginning to wake up to it anyway, so it's good. I'll probably never see it in my lifetime, but there are huge changes coming.
Yes.
Just not probably fast enough. But I think it's only a matter of reaching a critical point.
Yes, it is.
And then, you know, what did they say? There's 3 stages of truth. The first one is ridicule, the second one is attack you, and the third one, of course, it's the truth. So, you know, but it's definitely something growing, and shows like yours and other shows where you don't have to rely on the bought mainstream media is great, and that's why I like doing these type of shows. I also do the other ones now and again, but I don't get invited on them anymore because apparently the truth is something they don't like being talked about. I ran for politics one time, and I was actually told that, you know, they had a main sort of program, and they would only allow certain politicians on it to sell their wares, but I wasn't allowed on because, you know, I was sort of anti-establishment, if you like, and I was more for give the people what they want. And all I wanted was a provision in our constitution returned that gives the people the right of referendum. Because, and how could that be anti-democratic? I mean, if I'm willing to let the people decide on certain issues, that was the basis of which I was running. And they removed it from our constitution. We used to have that right left by our forefathers, that if you got a certain percentage of votes or signatures, that you could call a referendum on anything. And the amount of signatures was like a precursor to not having stupid referendum about, you know, everybody needs to wear pink shoes or whatever it might be. But I said that, you know, it was direct democracy that I wanted, which was what they call true form of democracy, that at least the people decide. There's no system sort of perfect where people can be corrupted, but at least if you call the right of referendum, that even if every politician is corrupted and wanted to bail out the banks, you can get enough signatures and just say, stop that, reverse that stupid idea. And that's why I wasn't allowed on these programs. And the other politicians told me, because they were nice enough guys, and I got to meet them on the campaign trail, they actually agreed among themselves that they were delighted I wasn't invited on this program because I would have destroyed them. And when I was on one of the programs, they introduced me as a non-runner, if you like. And yet I came fourth in better party sitting in government. But that's even how I was introduced onto one of the shows. Well, here's a guy not worth voting for. I mean, you've no chance of winning. Isn't that right? And I was saying, well, basically not now, seeing as that's how you've introduced me. But I gave them a real shock by coming forth and beating the Labour Party, who were in government at the time. But it's just this idea of, you know, so long as you have the same politicians spewing the same shite on the same gravy train money go round, they don't care that there's always change of faces and, oh, I'm going to do the next thing and I'll be a strong voice in government. And it's all complete horse shite. No one's going to be a strong voice. You're going to be told what you're doing and that's it. And that's why we have a party whip system, the same as in your country. You do what you're fucking told and that's it, or you'll be on the back benches. And it's anti-democratic. There's no such thing as democracy in your country or in ours because of that. And we can actually prove that in this country. No one in this country wanted to bail out the banks, yet it was forced upon us. So there we are thinking we have a democracy. We don't. And second to that is, if you consider that, you know, all of the people, none of us wanted to bail out the banks, the reason the government said they were doing this was they didn't want to see Ireland viewed in a bad light because it wouldn't attract business here. Now, I would view the opposite of that. If you take Ireland Inc. corporate as a company, which it is, you had Ireland Inc. paying debts, first of all, that it couldn't afford, and secondly, that wasn't theirs. And you think that's a good message to send out to the business community? Now, let's say you and I are top business directors of different companies, and I want to do business with your company, and I'm going to invest a lot of money by doing business in your company. But I hear in the background that your company is paying invoices that you can't even afford, that's bankrupting your company, and the invoices aren't even made out to you. They're not even your debt. You think I'm going to do business with you? I'm going to think you're a complete idiot and you shouldn't be running a business. But this is what our government said that, Ireland Inc. should be doing because we'll be respected in the business community. I don't know what business community would want to do with Ireland on that basis, that we'll bankrupt ourselves, paying debts we don't owe. It just doesn't make sense. We're all under this illusion that we have a democracy and everything. It's the Rothschilds and their fellow cohorts, all the way down to their minions on the street, being those ex-British soldiers. I don't hold them personally responsible or have any personal hatred for them whatsoever. They're minions who are just played. In my younger days, I might have had anti-British feelings because we were brought up like that in Ireland during the hunger strikes and everything. But at some stage, you must become a man and educate yourself.
Yes.
And realise that we're all programmed into this nonsense. And the sooner we all realise it, the better. And it'll be the better for humankind. And irrespective of where you are under the Rothschild ladder, whether you're a minion or right at the top or somewhere in between, even you at some stage have to realise the game is up. Yeah. But once I suppose you're on the gravy train and you have a comfortable life, who cares what happens maybe when you're dead? And you won't hold responsibility of that. And to be honest, if Rothschilds offered me 10 million that I could go and live in an island somewhere and my family would looked after, would I not take it? Who knows? Because I'm only human after all. So if you have a top job in a bank and, you're evicting people because you're huge wages and you can get out of the game in a couple of years on your huge wages and everything, who's to know? Human nature is difficult. So I don't hold hatred for any man, because I don't know how I would act if I was genuinely offered 10 million to piss off and get out of the game. I don't know. So I'm not going to bullshit and tell you I wouldn't take it. I'm not sure if I would or not either, but I'm not saying if I was actually showed the check that, would I get out of this and live on a Caribbean island somewhere with, everything at my whim because I had that money. I would be a liar to say, I definitely wouldn't take it. So that's why I don't hold anybody in a personal matter. I just want everybody to wake up and realise that, if we ran and had a proper democracy, we could actually have a beautiful life. Ireland is a beautiful country. It has so much natural resources that we can feed ourselves. We could live in harmony. We could grow so much food without spraying it with chemical shit that our brains don't get affected. And if you think the population of Birmingham is spread over our fertile lands, and also where you live in the north and all outside of the towns, you see you have the same beautiful countryside with fields with no food in most of them. And yet we have a problem feeding people, and there's people starving in the world. It's a system that doesn't allow for harmony on the earth.
Well, we've got farmers who could grow, but they're actually paid to not grow. They're subsidised to not grow food, and this is
the same here. We're paid not to grow, and why that couldn't be that instead of paying you not to grow, that you grow, but that doesn't enter the market. I understand the way the financial markets work, and if you glut it with turnips or beetroot or whatever it might be. Now, you remember in Ireland, we only grow potatoes, right? So, but that you glut the market with something, the price becomes down. Yes. But instead of paying the farmers not to create the food in order that it may glut the market, why not pay them to grow the food? But that food must be exported to countries where they have starving people. Mm. There surely is a humanity issue that must be addressed or must hit at the heart of right-thinking people in government or in the EU, but they don't care. You have to have starving people, and you have to have homeless people sitting on the street to show you, if you don't obey the system and you don't become a hard worker and you don't give us all your taxes and you don't work every goddamn hour God sends you, there's a homeless person to point at. That could be you, And then you have to have these football stars. So look what you could achieve. You could have that 3 houses and the 3 BMWs. So keep working on the treadmill. You know, you'll be that hamster. You'll never make it, of course. Some lucky ones will, you know, if they've got the right connections. But
on that point as well, the people that make it are the ones, they're ruthless, aren't they? They're the ones that will fuck somebody over, will do it. I know myself, because I heard a cousin of mine who's really in a really well-paid job in the States. He managed to get that job by getting rid of his own job and not filling that, and then the other candidate didn't come up with the same, so he saved him, I think, $800,000 a year by showing a way that he could close down that job. So he's taking another job from somebody.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, that's it. The Wall Street film, the early one, with Charlie Sheen, I think, was in it in the 80s. That was the epitome of people. It was like a film to show people be ruthless, succeed. You know, it doesn't matter about even his own father losing his job that time in one of the airlines or something. I can't remember too much about it now. But greed is good, and nice guys finish last. And this was, you know, being pumped out through these programs. And then it showed Charlie Sheen what he could have by being ruthless. You know, was it Daryl Hannah moved in with him? And, you know, so who wouldn't want all that, you know? So that was what was being fed to people in the 80s, and all those young kids that grew up watching that are all these brokers on Wall Street and all these bankers who are ruthless and kick people out of their homes. It doesn't matter, you know. I'm wealthy and look at me, I have this, and these are obviously bums that can't pay their way, you know, and they don't realize that they're just one of the minions in the system that was set up from years and years ago. I mean, we've quotes from, you know, old presidents of the United States saying that, you know, if people knew what banking was, to be riots on the street. Well, they obviously still don't know. And I'm going back there.
It were Henry Ford that said that. That if people knew how the banking system worked, then we'd all be hanging from lampposts. Listen, I just want to break this up just a little bit. You and Webby, just have a think about what we're going to finish off with in the last sort of 20 minutes. But we've just, in the last couple of minutes, we've just had something come through onto our Skype, and it's quite relevant because it involved our guest that we had on last night. So I just want, Andy, why don't you use the skinny on this one with your mic on?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for reminding me to switch the mic on. I actually remembered this time. Mark Steele, who was on last night, just this minute sent us a link. It's the Mail Online health section. A headline: the town facing a in quotes humanitarian crisis, end quote, caused by the radiation from state-of-the-art street lamps. Residents have endured insomnia, nosebleeds, and even stillbirths, scientists claim. And it goes on to name Mark Steele is aware of 3 women who lost babies since the lights were installed. One local resident gave birth to a deformed child that survived just 3 hours. Research suggests light transmitters prevent healthy cell and gene expression. Such radiation has been linked to cancer, insomnia, and mental health disorders. Past research found Wi-Fi radiation increases the risk of miscarriages by 50%. So I'm just absolutely chuffed to bits that Mark has got that in the Daily Fail. I'll be honest, I wouldn't wipe my arse on it because I try and get my arse cleaner when I'm wiping it rather than shittier. But it's getting out there in the mainstream. They're taking notice of the man. I understand Super Lead said, and if you go on to the YouTube, where it's gone now. Go on to the YouTube, someone has left a link from the local rag saying it's a conspiracy theory. So
that'll be our YouTube channel then, won't it?
Yeah, well, I've looked on I can see a comment from Twiggy Bush, and it's actually a link to a similar article on UK News Yahoo.com. So they're carrying the story as well.
Listen, I know what you made the point, and again, I'm going to try and play devil's advocate. You made the point. You said that you wouldn't wipe your arse on the Daily Mail, the Daily Mail, whatever you want to call it, and neither would I. But the people that we are trying to see this information are the people that buy the Daily Mail, the people that do see, that's what we want. So it's a good thing that it's going to get a good circulation in the Daily Mail, and it'll be on the Mail website as well, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely, Jace. I mean, I've lost count of the number of people who've said to me, if what you're talking about was actually real or true, it'd be on the BBC and in the Daily Mail, and I'd smack my head, walk away, forget it.
I'll tell you what, Andy, I've got a good example of that. But years ago, people were talking about chemtrails being conspiracy theory, and I produced a Daily Mail article that stated, for £100,000, you will be guaranteed the perfect weather for your wedding day.
Yes.
They will cloud seed and they will burst it so you have great weather. There you go. There's a conspiracy theory, £100,000. So I think there's a lot of stuff that are coming out. I mean, what Ben and I have been involved in is people think it's quite particular, because a lot of my friends and that, some are mortgage free. They claim they own the property when they don't actually realise within this system a man cannot own any property, because there is no man in this system. It's a business. You're not owning anything. You own the property title, not the allodial title. That means as long as they compensate you, you're out of that property, and that is what we're up against. That is, we're in a republic where Ben is. This is what happened with Iceland, whereas the Irish government ignored what the people wanted, rolled over, pulled the pants down and said, pull my pants up when you're finished. The Icelandic said, whoa, we're not fucking paying all these banks off. There's nothing to do with us, this. And that is what, I actually thought that people would take that on board and start to look at this stuff, but Coronation Street's still on, EastEnders is on, City and Liverpool are playing now tonight.
Yeah.
People.
The difficulty as well is in Ireland is we vote the same Muppets back in as well.
Yes.
So, at some stage we have to take responsibility, Yes. I mean, it's just, how can you do that? That just seems crazy to me. Well, and we only have Tweedledum and Tweedledee in this country, really. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. You always have hangers on that'll make up the numbers like Sinn Féin or Labour or stuff. But in general, everybody will still vote back Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, the same two parties who absolutely screwed the country, and they'll be voted back in. So I just give up hope.
Do you find that two-party system over in the Republic? Do you find that this party will disagree with this party on some things, and this one will disagree with this party on some things, but they never talk about what the two parties actually agree on?
Yeah, that's right.
They'll never ever talk about what they agree on. Well,
in our last election, the party in power, Fine Gael, could not make up the numbers. So Fianna Fáil, the other main party, has decided to support them, and they keep them in government now. So what does that tell you? I mean, Jeannie, Max.
Yes, it does. Jesus.
And then they attack me because I have a different view, where I say the people should have a say. That's all I was saying. And apparently I'm a lunatic, and I should be wearing a silver tinfoil hat or something. And look, I mean, just the nonsense. But they have these paid shrills or whatever you want to call them on Facebook, and they'll continually attack you when you're this and that. And I remember I was far left one time, and then I was accused of far right.
That's a hell of a pass, that, Ben, to switch from the left to the right.
Well, and I remember having to ask my friend what did far left and far right mean, because I didn't even know. And I was accused of both. And yes, if you actually consider, I didn't have any policies to put forward, because how dare I, if I'm saying we should have a democracy, put forward a policy to ram down your throat. All I wanted was that the people have a right to call a referendum. Yeah. We don't have that right. It was taken out of our constitution. And do you know what the government said when they took it out? That the government retained the right of referendum. They didn't have it in the first place to retain. It belonged with the people. But the Irish people bought this. And not only that, they said, oh, direct democracy. Should there be a referendum every day? And this was what radio DJs used to say to me. And I would say, I used to get real defensive about it. But then I sort of got blasé about it. And I would say, referendum every day. I used to say, about what? And then they'd say, well, you know, there'd be this, that, and the other. And I'd say, well, that's 7. There's 365 days in a year. I said, so come up with the rest of them. I can't think of what they are. But I said to your man, would there be a referendum on the bailing out of the banks? And he said to me, oh, yeah, there'd absolutely be a referendum on that. And I said, no, there wouldn't. Because the government wouldn't have come out with an idea to bail out the banks if you had direct democracy, because they knew they'd call a referendum to stop. So you wouldn't have had it. What it does do, it would lead to better governance, that, you know, they would do what's right by the people because they would know that they had a right of referendum. And yet here we have a referendum forced upon us that nobody asked for. Nobody went purposely seeking for us with a load of signatures from the people for an abortion. And yet in the biggest financial crisis and homeless crisis and healthcare crisis in Ireland, we have a referendum at last. And what's it about? Whether people want an abortion or not. So the mind just boggles at how people can still call ourselves a democracy.
Well, I've just actually been reading some of the comments on that Daily Mail article, and I'll be honest, I think we're fucked. We might as well give up. Quit. Because here's one. I live in Gateshead. I have small birds in my garden. I don't know anyone suffering from nosebleeds, nobody having stillbirths, no headaches, sleepless nights, etc. Think these people need their medication checked or get a job and keep busy.
Sure. But so why would they be on medication? I mean, 25% of people in Ireland are on some sort of antidepressant. 25% of the people.
The ironic thing is the person that wrote that comment is probably on medication for some anxiety or something. So you know,
he keeps birds in his back garden. What does that tell you?
Well, I think Mark was pointing out last night that that this is an issue particularly relevant to size. You know, it takes you a lot less time to cook a £10 chicken than it does a £2 one. So he said what it's going to do, first of all, it's going to kill all the flying insects, then it's going to kill the birds, then it's going to kill your pets, then it's going to kill you. So, but this guy, obviously, he's got birds in his garden, so he's not bothered.
Yeah. I think he's got bats in his fucking belfry, never mind birds in his garden.
I thought the person that in close proximity to any birds would aid it.
Over in one time.
So if you consider, like, people keep saying that's a conspiracy theory, what's the actual conspiracy?
Yeah.
I've always wondered what the conspiracy is. Like, if you think that spraying pesticides into your vegetables, now remember, only potatoes in Ireland, but in England where you grow cabbage and lettuce and stuff like that, and they spray pesticides that seep into the food, are you telling me that doesn't affect you when you eat it? Now, maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems that medication affects you. If you take an ecstasy tablet, it affects you. If you take LSD, it affects you. But yet this pesticides that are contained in the food, you take them and it doesn't affect you. Is that what we're saying? So that's a conspiracy theory. Okay, well, let's say it is. What's the actual conspiracy I'm trying to put forward?
Exactly. I mean, you've got the farmers are actually having to wear hazmat suits to administer these chemicals. Right. So again, if you're taking that into your body, you've got to be from, I don't know, the Twilight Zone to not think, well, if they're wearing hazmat suits to administer it and then I'm going to eat it, then surely it comes to that. I'm just reading one of the chats on Facebook Live from John Hull. He's asking Ben if there's any news about the Boys Trust.
Who's that from?
From a guy in the chat room called John Hull. He's a regular listener.
Is there any news from what?
He says the Boys Trust, BOYES Trust.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, I was banned off Fuckface or whatever it's called, Facebook.
Yeah.
Because I made some comments about certain individuals. And while I did say, look, I don't wish them any personal harm or anything like that, they're just people who haven't woken yet, and I could have been one of them for all anybody knows. So, but I was banned from Facebook, and during that time, there was one of these trolls on me about, oh, you didn't save the boys' farm and you weren't there for them. I knew nothing about it. Stephen Boys and myself have become very friendly over a number of years, but you've seen how he was treated. All the lands around Maghaberry Prison are owned by the Boys Family Trust, which was set up way back in the 70s. And it's a proper trust, and they have difficulty with it. So AIB put in receivers. We know the receivers are invalidly appointed. He can't get a hearing in the court in relation to that. They sent out armed police on numerous occasions to evict the family, and they stood fast. But unfortunately, they eventually got them out. As far as I know, a lot of the boys' family members are on the run because there's arrest warrants for them. And we know what's going to happen to them if they're caught, because the system will not support anybody that stands up against corruption and all of this stuff. And you see, the Department of Justice in the UK, or His Majesty's Department, or whatever it's called, they want expansion plans on Maghaberry Prison. It's landlocked. All the lands around it are owned by the Boys Family Trust, and they have a huge difficulty because the trustees only hold it in trust, and the AIB mortgages are invalid, should never have been put on it because the trustees or the beneficiaries didn't allow for that. So there's huge difficulties there for them. But what success they're going to have in courts, especially in the UK, in circumstances where they're all under the Crown, and the Crown being the City of London, once you go in there, you're playing their game. At least in Ireland, we have a constitution which gives us some protection. There's an oath of office that we can refer to, and private criminal prosecutions or private civil prosecutions should be brought against any judge who doesn't stick to their oath of office, or who, if they breach their oath of office, even within the courtroom, you should accept the resignation there and then. I mean, if you think about in our country, our constitution only allows for you to enter certain office by taking an oath, and all oaths are under God. So irrespective of whether anybody believes in God or not, you must be a believer in God to accept that office. Yeah. And our president has come out and says he's agnostic. And I'm just wondering, how did he take office? And if people don't start challenging this properly, there was a Judge Hogan, and Vin put it up on his website for People's Internet Radio. Judge Hogan in Ireland is a Court of Appeal judge, but he's a constitutional expert. And he said the Constitution is either redundant or basically it isn't. Yeah. So you either apply it or agree it's redundant. If in our country, if the Constitution is redundant, so are all the offices of government, the guards, the courts, everything, because all of them can only sit in office because of our Constitution. And, once you go against the oath of office that you took, or you step out of that office by a certain action that you take, you have deemed to be vacated the office. So people just need to remind themselves of that when they're before judges and courts in this land. If they're taking your dwelling and it's inviolable, and it's hired in positive law, the protection of it, then they have stepped out of office. But not if the court papers refer to it as a premises or a dwelling house. Because remember I said a dwelling house can be a B&B or a hotel. That obviously is a dwelling house of sorts. And if they don't accept that, then just accept the resignation. Mm-hmm. Because like a lot of people in Ireland will, be listening to this, and this Balbriggan thing is highlighting this sort of stuff through, especially the great work Vin has been doing on People's Internet Radio by highlighting this. Yeah. And nowhere in any court paper that I've seen, and I've seen hundreds over the years, as you can imagine, is there any application for the possession of a family dwelling pursuant to Article 40.5 of the Constitution? Because it couldn't be allowed.
Yeah, well, we seem to be looking over here. Andy and myself were talking about this the other night. That it seems to be coinciding with the mortgage collapse over in Ireland. That it's seemingly coming out now that the courts in this country have actually been defunct since 2008. So there's no actual courts operating with license. The royal assent has been revoked. Now, this is a Rothschild letter that I've read. It's available on the internet. Whether it's true or not, or authentic, that can be up for debate. But this is basically stating that as the Rothschilds are the royal bank, they've said that the royal assent has been withdrawn. It's been revoked. United Kingdom PLC is actually registered at Companies House as insolvent. Now, if that's the case, so if that's the case, there's no courts and we're insolvent, that means for the last 10 years they've been asset stripping this country. And all you've got to do is look at the migration flow that's coming in. There's no jobs, we don't produce anything, we don't manufacture anything. This is a complete, utter asset strip. And all our bonds are now going onto Wall Street. If the American economy collapses, which it's going to, the trillions, I can't even write how many zeros they're so-called in debt. But if you keep trying to pay debt with money that comes with debt attached, you are making debt. So the only way to do this is to forgive all debt. And the people have got to, as you were saying, Ben, there's a point where you've got to grow up and take responsibility for you. Fuck everybody else. Sort yourself out first. I was in that same ilk as you, Ben, where I didn't have any choice. It was pull my pants down, let myself be bummed to death, and then say, pull my pants up when you're finished. I can't do that. I would not be the man my mum wanted me to be. And I certainly wouldn't be the father that I should be if I just accept that.
Yeah, and I'm the same. I have young children, and I had a very young daughter, 6, who was suffering from leukemia at the time of all of this as well. Thank God she's doing great now, and she's 9 and healthy and everything. And I don't want to be seen to play a pity card or anything. There's many, many children suffer from that in Ireland. And again, of course, one must ask. I remember when I was going to school, I never heard of cancer or any child having cancer, and I never seen a bald kid in my life. But when you go and you see all these children with tubes up their nose and bald heads, what's feeding that? Oh, I remember it's a conspiracy theory about pesticides, the food and everything else. So it's coming from somewhere, and it doesn't have to be cancer, it's MS, it's whatever, all these new things that we never heard of back then. And serious questions have to be asked.
ADHD.
Yeah.
And also, being a pussy as well. When we grew up, if you were a pussy, you got that.
Right.
So you had to stop being a pussy. So that's gone as well.
But one thing I want to say about my daughter, and I'm not just saying this because she's my daughter and because she's a little girl. I have never seen a little girl who was so brave, and I mean that in every way. She's such a little girly girl. Her bedroom is pinky and she's all into pink, and she bought a little fluffy dog the other day out of her communion money or confirmation money, because when she got the cancer we had to get rid of our little family dog because her immune system was so low. So now that she's doing well, she bought this little teacup Maltese just last week. But the bravery that she showed and that she has now, even like I remember we were away and it was freezing cold and she'd jump in the pool and there was men looking at her and they wouldn't get in the pool even. She just has this incredible bravery, but she also has I'll take Liverpool have scored by your reaction on this.
They might have.
But what I was saying about my daughter, she had an absolute tremendous sense of humour during all of this. We used to have to push her if we went into Dublin. Remember, she was about 7 at the time, and we had to push her in a pram, like a buggy, because she was so weak that she couldn't walk. She'd get tired walking. And she was bald and with a feeding tube up her nose. And she would have a hat on, because it was cold. And what she used to love doing was at the top of Grafton Street, there was a joke shop. And she used to buy these fake cigarettes, right? And you know the one, it looks like it's glowing and it's real. And when you blow through it rather than suck, there's a puff of smoke comes out.
Yeah.
And she knew that, you know, when people were looking at her with the tube and she'd take off the hat in the shop and she'd see an adult looking over and then she'd look at them and go, you see, and she used to look at the reaction on their face. And of course, I used to stand a little bit away and I'd watch the reaction. And of course, something inside me had to say to the people, that's only a fake cigarette. And she used to say, shut up, Daddy, you know, because she used to love this sort of reaction of, here's a kid with cancer smoking, and she was clearly 7 or around that age. And she just used to love this, but she didn't realize, like, they were looking at me as a parent going, what sort of parent are you?
Superb. She sounds like an absolute inspiration. What's her name?
Isabella. Yeah.
Isabella. Well, we'll give Isabella our love and a big kiss from everyone here at Raconteurs News. Perhaps not Ada. You know, what's around his mouth?
But the point I'm trying to make, though, is that here's a 6-year-old girl that, you know, is so brave, takes everything with a bit of humour and battles. And I see grown men cry and nervous because they got a letter off a bank. You know, where is that on the scale of things between my little girl and a letter from a bank from a grown man?
Well,
come on,
I get.
Realize what they're doing to us.
I guess some of that is, Ben, that obviously she's had a good upbringing and she's not been taught to be afraid yet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You know.
Well, I remember when she was first diagnosed. I have to say the doctors were incredible people in the hospitals, and I remember we were nervous to discuss anything around her. And I remember him just saying, Isabella, you know you've cancer. And we were like shocked at this. And he says, that doesn't ring alarm bells for her. It only rings an alarm bell with you. You know, because the child of 6 didn't understand that. So once we were comfortable about that, then she knew she had cancer and there was no problem after that. And she knew she was ill. And, you know, but when I used to watch her, you know, vomiting, we would always have these bags that the hospital provided, and when she was on medication, she'd just go, whoa, grand out. You know, it was just that sort of attitude with her that was incredible, you know, because I wouldn't even be like that.
So it sounds like, Ben, though, I know a few children personally. It seems like some of them have been here before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
They've sussed this. They know there's something not right, and they're not going to buy into the bullshit. Because if you look at millennials, what people call the millennial generation, now, I can't have a conversation with many of them. They speak in sound bites. You can talk about football, you can talk about films. I mean, there's adults my age and older than me, you still can only have those conversations with. Yeah. The trouble is, because I work with people, I bludgeon them. I bludgeon them with it because they'll be talking about stuff, and I have to. There's no, like a fella said to me, well, I've no mortgage, so I've no problem. No, and if they want your property, mate, they'll just come and take it. So what do you think compulsory purchase is? Well, you can't do anything about that. I said, you can if you actually own the allodial title. They couldn't do that. I said, it's happened many a time where people have owned everything, and the councils can't do anything, this can't happen, but people don't understand it, and until it comes and knocks on their door. But that's when they turn to me and then say, what do I do with this? Well, you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong, you've done that wrong. So you've got to completely undo all that before you can even start.
Well, I try not to sort of bludgeon friends of mine at all. I just try to do it publicly, and then it's out there. Yeah. And whether my friends accept it or not, they accept me as a friend. Yeah. And some of them would say, you're absolutely right, and blah, blah, blah. And another friend of mine, he's a very funny guy. He says, how many's in your cult now? You know, this sort of thing. He's a very funny lad. And I used to say, oh, my cult is growing, you know. So we'd have these sort of funny conversations. But my youngest child, Bobby, you know, at the time, he's wild. You know, he just is wild. He's not like my other 2 children who are very quiet. and he always had this wild streak in him. And even now, you know, he's wild. And it's something that I don't want to curtail, but he still can get bold. And there's a sort of line that you have to sort of, you know, try to maintain with him. But one of the times my wife was taking Isabella to hospital because she had an appointment. And when they got in the car, Isabella said, "Oh, Mommy, I'm going to be sick." And she said, "Oh, come on into the house quickly." So the two front doors were open on the car as they went in. And we have a CCTV system. So on the CCTV system, you could see Bobby. He's only 2. He crawls into the car. He obviously releases the electronic handbrake, which I don't think you can do anymore. But the handbrake, you see the car going down the driveway and just taking the 2 doors from the pillars. So he crashed his first car at 2, and he is completely wild. And I remember saying to Isabella, because she's quite an intelligent girl in school even, and I was saying to her, "Would you become a barrister?" And her reply to that was, "Why? You think Bobby's going to need one?" So this is the sort of thing you see them pick up on, you know. And I remember Bobby said to me one day, and it's surprising what they pick up on, because I don't talk to Bobby, obviously, about this sort of stuff. But it's amazing what they pick up on. Yeah. And he said to me one day, I was stopped at a red light. He said, "Daddy, you're sovereign. Go on ahead." And I said to him, "Yes, but there's sovereign people coming the other way as well. I can't crash into them." You know, but it's very funny from a child's perspective what they must hear being discussed in the house or whatever, that they put their turn on it. And it's just so funny. But I would love to be them, if you know what I mean, growing up with the education that they're going to get, that, you know, they'll have no fear of the system. So, and that's what I'm trying to do with people in Ireland. Relieve the fear. Forget about the fear. Let go of the fear. You know, you came in with nothing. We're leaving the earth with nothing. Show me the man that owns anything, because you came in with nothing, you're leaving with nothing. All you have is the use of something. And if you can enjoy the use of it and fight against corruption, where they're trying to keep everything for themselves, they mustn't realize they leave the earth with nothing either. And, you know, so people need to comprehend their own lives and enjoy things in life. And life is very short. I mean, I'm 55, and I remember a guy one time saying to me, if you take out a ruler, you know, one of these pull-out tape measures, and you look at 80, and most people are lucky if they make it to 80. He said, look at the amount of tape you've already gone through. Are you satisfied in life? Have you realized that, you know, you've nearly lived most of your life? And it was a shock to me. And I remember somebody else saying, or I seen it in a film one time, where a guy said, if you were 80 in an old folks home now, what would you say to yourself at this age? And I really think that's a great thing for people to ponder on, to say, like, because eventually, if we're lucky enough, we'll be 80 years of age, and whether we're in a home or in our own home with our family, maybe looking after us or whatever, what would you say to yourself if you had the chance to travel to be that 80-year-old man? What would you say to yourself now? You know, of all the things we worried about and all the things we didn't do, or worried about this and worried about the cops and worried about the banks, you'd have told them all to go fuck themselves, you know? Yeah. So, and like I always say to people, think about that. You know, think about you're 80 and somebody says to you, I'm going to give you that time of your life back again. You know, I'm going to send you back to when you were 55, or you guys look like you're in your 40s or whatever. You know, I'm going to send you back to that time. What would you do different? Because now you're here. You've got that opportunity. And don't waste it.
Obviously, that's an ideal world, and I understand the philosophy. And you're a man who speaks with great passion, Ben. And we've had loads of people commenting in the chat room and on Facebook Live as well. Drunken Leeds has said that all his thoughts are with Isabella, and I think everybody would echo that.
Absolutely.
And I Ate the Germans has said, great guest, 2 hours has flown. And it has been, you have been a great guest. And do you know, we've gone like 8 minutes over. I'm going to try and stop you about at 9 o'clock, but you seem to when you start talking about your family, you seem to sort of spring to life, and there's this like new energy that comes out of you. And
well, I tell you, the reason for that is I had a heart attack 2 years ago, and I genuinely thought I was a goner. I was in a lake in the middle of nowhere in Ireland. No disrespect to my friends in Leitrim and Sligo, Roscommon. It was sort of in the middle of all of that, and I was having one of the most peaceful days. I was on a stags. We weren't drinking or anything like that. And we rented a boat to get onto the lake because it was like an adventure thing we did for the stags. And I was having the most peaceful day, and I had a heart attack in the boat. And I really thought I was a goner. And my friends, you know, being lads, thought I was messing, and they were going to throw me into the lake. And well, you can understand that, right? Because we were rowing back in, and I had stopped rowing. And I was lying on the boat like that, and you know, lads are saying, "Come on, chuck him in, he's messing." Now, imagine if they had done that, right, and I died. You can imagine, like, among lads themselves, and it's the same in England. This is worldwide. They would have said to each other, "Right, now here's the story we tell his wife." But you know, I genuinely had a heart attack, and I remember looking at myself. I had a wetsuit on and was rolled down to my waist, and obviously I had bare feet, and my feet were the colour of death, and they were just short of with a tag on them. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to die here. And, you know, I thought of my family and the disappointments of not being with them, and did I hug them enough, and did I say I loved them enough, and I had this opportunity. And I'm not saying, oh, look, I found God and I'm reborn or anything like that. But I'm just saying that it made me realize what's important in life, because I have the second opportunity. I am a bit like the guy in his home in 80, because I'm sent back to this time. Because I'm telling you, lads, I genuinely thought I was gone. And I survived this. And, you know, I had a friend, Johnny Squires, unfortunately, who passed away last year from a heart attack. And he didn't make it. So I'm always thankful, like, when I see my children or talk about my children, because if I had left then, think about all I was leaving with was a wetsuit on me rolled down to my waist. I didn't even have shoes on. And it wouldn't have mattered to me whether I had a lovely suit and a gold watch. It didn't matter whether I had a Ferrari parked outside the door. It didn't matter, because the point is I was leaving with nothing. And I sometimes... And I had realized that I forgot to treasure the real riches I had in my life. I have these incredible children, wild as one of them is, brave as the other one is, and my eldest son, who's fluent in the Gaelic language and a very quiet, polite chap. You know, these were my gifts, and my good wife, and all my families. I mean, I've 8 sisters and I've 3 brothers. I have a huge, typical Irish family. And, you know, here I was thinking I was dying and didn't even have a chance to say goodbye to them. So I'm only trying to get across to people, like, fight the good fight, but when you go home, enjoy the riches that you have. And I mean that. I'm not talking about bullshit money. I'm talking about the real riches of life, you know. And just if I can convey that from some, because you don't always meet someone who was genuine, had a heart attack, was genuinely dying, and then, you know, whose friend passed away. And I'll be meeting with his family soon. We're having a little dinner, and we always try to meet each other to stay in touch. But just to, you know, to say to people out there, you don't know what's around the corner. Exactly. You know, you do not know what's around. And enjoy. Don't forget, while fighting this fight that we have to fight for humanity and our generations and our children, absolutely. Fight the fight with full vigour, as do I. And I love it when I fight in the courts against the corruptness. But don't forget, when you go home, to close the door and say to yourself, I am rich. I think
Jason will agree with all that, because it's very... I think part of that is your drive, isn't it, Jason, about what you've been through? It's very similar, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm on heart attack number... I've had 3. And I've had 3 strokes. So I'm
well, you're well then. You know, so you must, it must echo with you what I'm saying, you know, that every morning you wake up, you know, give thanks that you're alive. You know, you can live another day to hug your family, smoke a cigarette, whatever you're doing. And the reason I'm saying smoking a cigarette, I see you smoking there for a man that had strokes and heart attacks and giving out about poisons in the food. I remember I was at a seminar. Look, I always like to keep a sense of humour about these things, but I was at a seminar where everybody was giving out about chemtrails and blah, blah, blah. And during the break, most of them were outside smoking, and I just said, you know.
That's a medicinal fag, though, that he's got, Ben.
Yeah, well, the medicinal fags are fine. Look, I take cannabis drops, you know, the CBD and stuff like that. I do that. To be honest, if I was so inclined, it wouldn't bother me growing cannabis plants and smoking them. And I don't care what any other person says from the Rothschilds that, oh, you can't smoke that plant, or suddenly that plant is a drug. Such absolute nonsense. Or you're growing a plant. As if I could grow a plant. I mean, I could put a seed in the ground and I can water it, but the miracle of growth and life, certainly I have nothing to do with.
And you can grow potatoes.
Well, apparently we couldn't grow them very well. They got blight and they failed.
Well,
but the main thing is, like, we all agree that, you know, we're fighting the one fight. We may fight it in different ways. We're all still correct. There's no right way to do it, no wrong way to do it. If people don't understand that, and they don't have bravery first, the bravery that I have comes from knowledge and experience in the courts. So if the thing, and you're not well experienced with it, and you just want to start with a parking ticket, do it, parking ticket. And if you lose, so what? You might have to pay a little fine. But my father used to always say that a lesson bought is worth two taught. And in other words, if the parking ticket costs you a few quid and a fine because you messed up, you'll be a lot better the next time. Or a free license thing or whatever. And it'll give you court guile. And, you know, the only way you can defeat these people is actually in the courts as well. Yeah, I know you can defeat them on the streets and everything else because other people don't have court guile. And you see in Balbriggan was people power as well. And that's what I try to maintain in Ireland, that the group that I suppose, I don't mean follow me or support me. I don't want to say that in I'm a leader type of thing in an egotistic manner. But I just impart information to them. And when they see me standing up to sheriffs or whatever, it means they can do it too. And they see that they can do it because I'm not special. I'm not anybody. I'm just an ordinary family man who had a heart attack and who had my own family difficulties that I told you about. So if I could do it, there's nothing brave about me. I'm probably the biggest coward ever. But the point is, with knowledge comes that little bit of guile and what people might perceive as bravery. And they'd say, like, I've often met people and say, oh, you're brilliant. And I'd say, no, I'm not. All I have is just that little bit of experience and guile that you haven't. But there was a few years ago, I didn't have that.
Yes, of course.
And I think of the first affidavits I put into court and stuff. Oh, my God.
Me too.
It's worthy now. But you have to start somewhere. So even if it's a parking ticket, make the change because, you know, if you look at the way ants work or, you know, the way anything works where there's a mass of something, you know, we need everybody to chink away at the armour and the huge armour that this sort of system has. And I'm not trying to destroy a system. I'm only trying to change it. Yes. We'll probably never destroy it, but change it for the better. And if we can do that in our lifetime and our children continue to do that, then it's terrific.
Brilliant. Right. Well, listen, we've gone 17 minutes over. You can't half talk, Ben Gilroy.
That's
we would love to have you back on again at some point, but I've really got to put an end to this, a wrap on this, because I need to enjoy the real riches in my life, which is my wife, who's been at work all day, so I've not really seen very much of her, and my new puppy as well, which I got a couple of days ago. So
and I'm still here. Look, I'm still here in my office. I haven't even got home yet, and I'm talking about embracing my family. She'll kill me. She'll kill me if she hears this on Facebook, because she's going to say, you're such a bullshitter, and you kept talking and wouldn't shut up and get home to your lovely family.
Oh, and for everybody who's listening on Spreaker or on the website, Ben's just turned his laptop round to show us the boardroom that he's sat in while he's talking to us. Brilliant, Ben. Fantastic chat. Really enjoyed it, mate. I do hope you'll come back again when you've got some more to talk about.
Of course.
Jason,
Yep.
are you going to wrap up, mate?
Yeah, well, just big thanks to you, Paul, and to you, Andy, and a great big thanks to you, Ben. You cut off, we've just wind you up and just let you go, and then you boom. It's been so easy for us tonight. But so a great big thank you, and you're welcome back on Raconteurs News at any time that you'd like to come on. So I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for listening, all the people in the chat room. A big thank you to the people watching on Facebook Live. And remember that there's not going to be a nuclear war. There's not going to be a nuclear war. Forget about it. There's never going to be one. And even if there is, what can you do about it? So that's Ben's Don't Worry, Be Happy. I think we probably should have played out with that, but we'll
Don't say Liverpool are after scoring again before we go.
No.
It might be 2-1 now. It might be.
Well,
Rolly Firmino!
Super Leeds as
it's a good night from him, and it's a good night from me.
It certainly is.
Super Leeds has even requested a song for you tonight. I hope you like it, Ben. We're going to play out with the Cranberries and Linger.
Brilliant.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Super Leeds is in the chat and he's after a wife.